First off, I have to make a declaratory statement. I was not in the Navy. Well, somebody's got to keep the Navy in line. I was in the Army, so I made the mistake of going up to the ship, and I met Mike Kegley, and he said that the Bay City schools were going to possibly do some summer school classes on the ship. Well, I had just retired after teaching school for 35 years, and he said, what I need is a director of education. And that's what I've been since then. Anyway, about the Edson, it's had a unique history. It is named after Colonel Merritt Edson, who was a recipient of the Medal of Honor during World War II. He was in charge of the 1st Marine Raider Battalion that landed on the island of Tulagi in August of 1942 when the invasion of Guadalcanal took place. After securing the island, they moved them to Guadalcanal itself, and there was a ridge about 1,000 yards from the end of Henderson Field, which was the runway on the island, which is the reason they invaded it. And when they got there, there was nothing there. No troops, nothing. And Henderson's 600 men, and then Marine Corps engineers, and the remains of a battalion of paramarines, roughly 800 men, took on over 1,000 Japanese over a 2-night period. And they were able to hold Henderson Field, and as a result, Merritt Edson was awarded the Medal of Honor. He later went on, he retired from the Marine Corps as a Major General. He became the head of the Vermont State Police, and he was also a past president of the National Rifle Association. In 1953, he was called back to active duty to rewrite the code of conduct for POWs. After the Korean War, where guys were being brainwashed by the communists and that kind of stuff. While he was doing that, something happened, and those of us who are veterans know about the voices. And he heard the voices, and he answers those, and he committed suicide. The ship itself is a part of the Forrest Sherman-class. There were 15 ships in the class, of which only 2 still exist. Edson here in Bay City, and the C. Turner Joy, which is in Bremerton, Washington. Now, here's a trivia question for you. What was the Turner Joy's claim to fame? Anybody know? Right? The Gulf of Tonkin incident that ended up getting us into Vietnam. The Maddox was attacked supposedly by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. That was confirmed. And then the next night, they had brought the Turner Joy in as support, and another attack supposedly took place, and that led to our involvement in Vietnam. As I said, the Turner Joy is in Bremerton, and Edson, when it retired in 1988, became a museum ship in New York City. And it was there from 1989 through 2003. In addition to that, she's also had some interesting claims of fame. In 1962, A Twilight Zone episode was filmed on the ship with Rod Serling. Uh, a very young Bill Bixby was in it, Nehemiah Persoff, uh, and I'm drawing a blank on some of the other people. But it was called The 30 Fathom Grave. And it was supposedly one of the members of the crew was the only survivor of a U.S. Navy submarine that was sunk off of Guadalcanal. So tying things together that way. I don't think they knew that when they did it, but that was what was done. And then while it was in New York City, 2 episodes of Law and Order, parts of them were filmed on the Edson, primarily using aft berthing, which you can tour, the mess deck, and the passageways around the ship. And since then, in the last, about 2 years, we've been on Destination Michigan, and this past summer, we were on Under the Radar. So now members of the crew who were involved in that, a couple of them were walking around, and these people came up to us and said, "Hey, I saw you on Under the Radar." So we just received a thing from TripAdvisor that, according to their polls and all that kind of stuff, and I don't know how they do it, but we are supposedly one of the top 10% tourist attractions in the world. We just received documentation on that. And for mid-Michigan, we are the #1 tourist attraction, so they say, for mid-Michigan, which we won't turn them down. But as far as the history of Edson goes, the keel was laid in 1956. It was commissioned in 1958 and served on active duty until 1988. It did 10 tours off of Vietnam. On one of the tours, with Commander John Holmes in command, they fired roughly 27,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition, which was equivalent to 1 million pounds of gunpowder. And the 5-inch barrels on our guns had to be replaced 3 different times. So they did a lot of shooting. They covered between, as an air guard for the aircraft carriers. If a pilot went down around the carrier, they would pick them up. And then they served on the gun line on shore, firing on shore targets. And that's when the ship was hit. In 1968, it got into a duel with a North Vietnamese artillery battery. And while they were firing, we were hit twice. We had 8 people injured. They knocked out gun control. So the gun captain for Mount 51, which is on, I don't know if it shows up very well on the picture here, is on the bow of the ship. And the gun captain in charge of that gun had a piece of shrapnel sticking out of the back of his shoulder. And he wanted a corpsman to remove it. Well, this guy wasn't a doctor, and he says, if I do that, I could screw up your arm and you'd never be able to use it again. The gun captain had a few choice words for him that I can't repeat in mixed company. And he reached back and started shaking the thing and pulled it out and said, put a bandage on the damn thing. And he went back to the gun, fired it manually, and took out the North Vietnamese battery. Well, when the ship pulled away, it was smoking, and so the North Vietnamese claimed they sank it. And so, therefore, one of our nicknames is we're the galloping ghost of the Vietnamese coast. We have a few other choice names too. 3 guns, no waiting. You spot them, we'll hit them. So it's a interesting experience to be on there. The people we've worked with from the ship uh, come back. 2 weeks ago, they had their reunion here at the ship, and we had 58 members of the crew from 58 to 88 come on board the ship, which is a very unique experience because I was pumping them all for stories because as I said, not being in the Navy, I use their stories to talk about the ship. Probably the best one that I heard was from Commander Holmes himself. Uh, One of the former skippers came out to the ship with a CIA officer when it was off of Vietnam. And he came on board, and the guy was from South Carolina, and there is no way I'm going to even attempt his accent. And he asked if they could put a couple rounds down into a North Vietnamese Reds camp that was around the bend of the river. And so he figured we'd use all three of our guns. And the gun captain from Mount 53, which is on the forecastle, stuck his head out and said, "Skipper, we'll take care of it." So they fired 2 rounds for smoke, and then they started firing regular rounds. After about 10 seconds, they got a radio call saying, ceasefire, and we called back to them and said, "We will cease fire. However, please disregard the other 11 rounds that are already in the air." Because a good gun crew could fire 40 rounds a minute. Each round weighs 110 pounds with powder charged to it. The shell itself weighs 70, and the gunpowder brass casing weighs another 40. So it will do some interesting damage for people. Uh, some of their other jobs, they actually escorted an Army truck convoy along the coast. They were in constant radio contact. If a problem developed, they'd call out to the ship, and the ship would fire a few rounds back in. We were also, however, attacked by our own Air Force. It seems F-4 pilots can't tell the difference between an American destroyer flying the flag and a North Vietnamese ship. So they fired 3 rockets at it. One went by the stern of the ship. The other 2 went between the smokestacks of the ship. However, when it hit the ship on the other side of us, which was the HMAS Hobart, which was an Australian destroyer, one of their seamen was killed. So the Air Force apologized and all that good kind of stuff. But didn't make people too happy, to say the least. As I said, the ship was retired in 1988 and became part of the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in 1989, which put it in New York City on September 11th, 2001. After the Twin Towers went down, the city of New York came to Intrepid and Edson, and for a week, those 2 ships served as the emergency management center for the city of New York. Because our radios still work. And one of the major problems with 9/11 was all the different groups had different radio frequencies. So the fire department couldn't talk to the police department, they couldn't talk to the Port Authority, and so on. So that was one of the problems that I hope to God has been corrected. So they were able to come to the ship. They could set a frequency for each group down there, and that way they could compile information and disseminate the information a lot quicker than having one person basically run back and forth and say, this is what's going on. When the British and the French retired the Concorde, Intrepid asked for one of the Concordes, and it was granted. They assumed they'd put it on their flight deck. Unfortunately, it was way too big. So a special barge was built, and the only place they could dock it was where Edson was. So Edson became the first museum ship ever to be given back to the Navy. And the Navy, being the Navy, they said, well, we won't take that until you put it in dry dock. So the Intrepid had to spend $7 million, thank you very much, to get Edson back in shape before the Navy would accept it. And in 2003, it moved into the Philadelphia Naval Yard, and there it sat. In 1979, I'm sure some of you know, is when they started to try and get a ship here. And it took them until 2011. When we got the Intrepid, and just to show you, I'm sure we all know government bureaucracy. The first set of paperwork we sent to the Navy was this high, and we had to mail it. It weighed 27 pounds. The first one, we had to do 5. When they granted it to us and we came in, according to what I was told, because I was still working then, they were handed a single sheet of paper. And the captain in charge of the Philadelphia Naval Yard said, sign here. So as soon as they signed it, he turned to Mike Kegley and said, now get it the hell out of my yard. So that's how we got Edson. As I said, I've been with the ship now for over 7 years, and I absolutely love it. I love coming out to talk to people. I love all the activities that we do on there. I can also put in a little plug before we take our break. The thing on October 14th, where you're going to Babette's Foundation, I recommend it highly. Probably because I'm on the board there too, but it's a very good program. It's not open just to veterans, it's open to everyone. And we have a variety of activities going on there, and you don't have to be a vet to be involved in them. We have they have a completely functioning wood shop. And if you have an idea of something you want to do, before they let you on the machines, you have to take a safety class. And then we'll let you get involved in things you want. We're not out to break anybody. Costs are fairly minimal, basically just to pay our expenses. We have meetings where vets come in just to talk, especially the guys from Iraq and Afghanistan. Being a Vietnam vet, I know when we came home, we were all kind of forgotten and known as those crazy people. Because I can still remember news stories when I was in college. If something happened, it was a Vietnam vet that did it. So I'm happy that we have this program because we've got to talk to a lot of vets, both men and women. And in talking with some women, when they've gone to the VFW or the American Legion to join, they've been told, oh, the auxiliary meets on this day. So finally, a group of them got, to put it mildly, pissed off. And a lady down just south of Flint actually got permission with the Michigan American Legion to form a post for women only. And even then, as she was saying, it's a pain in the butt to meet, to find a place to meet, because it seems the posts around them always happen to have something on the nights they wanted to meet. What a pain in the butt. Well, when I came home and wanted to join, I was told I hadn't fought in a war. And for years, I stayed out of the Legion. I still won't go to the VFW, but that's a personal thing between me and them. But what we'll do is we'll take a little break, and then uh, we'll do a little question and answer thing and that kind of stuff, and you can look at the other things. If you want, I'll run out to my car, which I should have brought in with me, my business card, that if you want to come out to the ship, I will be more than happy if you contact me to come and take you on a tour. Because you see, I have the keys. Okay, so I'll open it up for questions. And as I say at the ship, if I don't know the answer, I'll make one up. But most of you would probably know the answer anyway, so I'm not going to say that. Yes,
How long does a typical tour last?
on average, about an hour and a half. But I've done some for as long as 2.5 because people will ask a lot of questions. And in some cases, if they're a pretty good group, like I said, because I have the keys, I'll open up areas where we usually don't take people. I had a group of ER residence doctors from CMU, so I made the mistake of opening up sick bay. And it was like putting kids in a candy store. Oh, wow, did you see this? Did you see that? And then we had a couple former cooks from the ship. So, of course, we opened up the galley for them. And they went around there and were telling us stories how they did different things in the galley, and how this one lieutenant that one young ensign that they didn't like, uh, he went in and started telling people who were cooks to get out of there and go do this and go do that. And the skipper came by. Well, one of the guys he was telling to go do this and go do that was the captain's personal cook. And in a matter of about 2 hours, the ensign with bags were packed and he was walking down the gangway. So I guess, you don't do stuff like that. Before the pandemic came, we were hoping to have what we call the 9/11 room on the ship. Right now it's being used as storage, but we were in conversations with the people in New York where we could get some of their computers and some of the maps and all that kind of stuff. And we were going to redo the room so that we could take people in there to actually see what the 9/11 room looked like. Because that's what we call it when you're going down to get somewhere. Where are you going? Well, I'll be in the 9/11 room. Well, all of us know what that is, and then people look at us and go, 9/11 room, what's that? And then we have to go through and tell them the story and that stuff. But we don't kick anybody out. Let me put it that way. Uh, a friend of mine and her daughter came on board the Sunday after we had our 11th anniversary about 3 weeks ago. and there were still two guys on the ship from the Edson reunion. And so they took him around. They were on board for 4 hours because they took him into every little nook and cranny. Oh, do you want to see this? Oh, do you want to see that? And they were just fascinated by it. When I was at church the following week, I said, well, you should have given me a call. Oh, heavens no, these guys were just so great. They took myself and Emma around wherever we wanted to go, and they showed us this and they showed us that, and they showed us where the ghosts were. And so, oh, by the way, I have to clarify that too. We have 3 ghosts on the ship. One is named Paul. Paul was a caretaker on the ship when it was in New York City, and he actually suffered a heart attack on the ship and died on the way to the hospital. And he used to plague the heck out of Mike Kegley. He would open the windows on his car, open his sunroof when it was raining, and stuff like that. The second ghost is actually a member of the crew who committed suicide on the ship. He received a Dear John letter from either his wife or his girlfriend, and the crew won't tell us his name, and we respect their privacy on that, so we don't push it. But they did show us a spot where he did it at. There's a couple hatches on the ship that can only be opened and closed from the inside at that time. And as a result of that, the Navy went through and refitted all their ships so that you could put a chuck key in and automatically open up those things so they couldn't stay that way. And then the third one's the dog. And no one in the crew that we've talked to can ever remember a dog being on board the ship. And I'll be honest, I really don't believe in ghosts and that stuff, but I heard the dog bark. So I go, okay, let me go give Rod Serling a call, but otherwise of that. So that's why starting next weekend, we start our what's known as the Edson incident. It's our Halloween, where we turn it into a haunted ship. And that'll be every Friday and Saturday nights from 7 to midnight till the weekend before Halloween. And that'll be the last weekend it'll be there. And their motto is, they will scare the ship out of you. And believe it or not, it's one of our biggest fundraisers of the year. And according to the guys who run it, and they are going to bring us a copy of the magazine, we're the #1 haunted attraction in the state of Michigan, according to Haunted Attractions magazine. So I'm going, okay. I'm not going to argue with them. I'll be honest, we made $48,000 last year. So, yes.
The visitorship, how is that going for visitors? Could you give us any numbers?
Well, we started a program this year for every 1,000 people that come on board. We have them fill out what looks like a ticket, and we just use it as a raffle. And for every 1,000 people, we draw 3 tickets, and we contact them, and we'll mail the prizes to them. Or if they're in the area, they can come pick them up. And we're on the 10th barrel full this month. So we're hopefully are going to have 10,000 people before the end of September, we're hoping, which is 4,000 people more than all of last year. So, yeah, it's getting better. Yes, sir.
What is your annual operating budget and where does the money come from?
Our annual operating budget is, well, let me put it this way. We're in debt. And it's not a joke. We're still paying off our towing. It cost us $750,000 to get the ship here. The 2 concrete berthing pads were $400,000 a piece. Our average electric bill is about $1,500 a month during prime time. So uh, we're in the black as far as savings and that stuff goes. I shouldn't say that we're in a world of hurt. We're not. But our budget, because things pop up all the time that we don't expect, uh, fluctuates. But most of it comes from admissions. It's $14 a person, age 18 and higher, $10 for kids from 5 to 17, and kids below 5 are free. Military personnel is 12. Veterans, I should say, and if you come in uniform, it's free if you're active duty. So don't rush home, jump into your uniforms, and get on the ship for free.
I was just thinking of that.
Unless you come on a night when I'm there because there's some other meeting. You know, I'm sorry, I don't have the code to the cash register. I'm a history teacher, I'm not a mathematician. Sir.
Originally, you were going after the atoms of which was built at DePaul, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I worked at DePaul 2 summers out of high school, 65, 66, chipping welds in the bilge. Young people can't tell me what kind of bad job they got. Yeah.
I worked at US Steel when I was in
Yeah, there
college.
you go. So anyway, all that said, when you mentioned the reunion of the sailors, because this vessel is of the type that was built at DePaul, has there ever been a DePaul reunion of workers from DePaul?
To my knowledge, no, but we're always open for reunions. I'm quite serious about that. We've had reunions from a number of the other ships that were in the Forrest Sherman-class, which EDSON is a part of, have come up and had a reunion there. We've had the Morton, the Bigelow, the Barry after the Washington Naval Yard got rid of it. For those of you who didn't know, when NCIS first came on and they showed you the pictures outside of the Washington Naval Yard, the ship that was there was number 933, the USS Barry, which is a part of the Forrest Sherman-class, which EDSON is a part of. So if you come onto the ship and I take you around, I'll show you the surgical lights that are in the wardroom, which came off the Barry, because when a ship is scrapped, before they get rid of it, they contact all the other ships in the country and say you can come out there and get what you want. Well, some of the things that we wanted, somebody else had already claimed, so we take what we can get. We're scavengers. Anybody who's been in the military is a scavenger. That's how we found the flag we have in the wardroom. It has 48 stars on it. We found it in a box marked trash that had a note pinned to it that said, "This flag flew on the USS Selfridge on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii." And so then we went in and went online and got the Selfridge after action report. It turned out it shot down 5 Japanese aircraft and damaged the 6th. There were only 29 planes shot down in the entire attack. And they were going to throw it away. Any other questions?
How far of a distance do you draw people from, like school groups?
We've had tour groups from as far away as Kansas. A number of them, what they do is they're going to gamble at one of the casinos and they need a time, they have a time frame. Well, some of them go to Frankenmuth, and if there's men with them, you get tired of going to Frankenmuth. Come on, Frankenmuth is a nice place. Nothing against Frankenmuth, by the way. But if I had my choice of going to Bronner's or going to see a 428-foot long destroyer that I could play on, I'm going to the destroyer. So we get stuff like that. This summer, Dow Chemical had a group of guys from Denmark who were here on an exchange program. And they came on a Sunday afternoon, and I took them around. And as they were going through the engine room and that kind of stuff, they saw our reduction gear and that kind of stuff. They go, "Oh, we have those things. Do you guys want to sell this?" So I opened up the boiler room, which we really just keep most people on the upper level because there still is some asbestos on the ship. And I let them go down the next level. And they were like kids in a candy store. They started talking in Danish and in German, and they were just getting all excited about it because they're seeing all these different gauges and stuff like that. They just had a high old time, and I just let them go. And that's what we do. We had one guy, believe it or not, who was Skyping to his father who lived outside of Moscow a couple years ago while he was taking a tour of the ship and describing the ship to his father. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning in Moscow. So, yeah, we get them from all over the world. The other day when I was there, we had a couple from Spain who saw the thing online and they decided to stop. And he had been in the Spanish Navy. So it just depends. They're come from all over the place. We never turn anybody down. Like I said, we have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Cub Scouts that come on and spend the night. And I've gone up there a couple times with them to help the Boy Scouts who are working on their history merit badge because they need someone to talk to. And we do that, and that way they earn their merit badges. We have another one of our volunteers who ties knots. And so he was there teaching them how to do the different knots so they could get that merit badge. So we try to do things for everybody. As far as activities, we've had weddings, we've had retirement parties, from regular jobs, from people retiring from the Navy. We've had people re-enlisting in the Navy on the ship. We've even had funerals on the ship. Probably the strangest one I ever dealt with was anybody in here in the Coast Guard?
Auxiliary, but nevertheless,
When they got promoted to, I believe it is Chief Petty Officer, they buried their lower ranking stripes. They actually had to make a little coffin. They had a chaplain there. They had a person blow taps and went through the burial at sea and threw these things into the Saginaw River. I'm surprised they didn't float, but they threw them into the Saginaw. And I know they were being serious because it's a tradition, but I'm trying not to laugh because I had never seen this before, and I'm going, God, when I made sergeant, they just tossed me the stripes and said, "Sew them on," But it was different. But that's the kind of stuff we do. So if you've got an idea, talk to us. If we could squeeze it in, we will. We were trying to do a murder mystery tour on the ship this year in around the 4th of July, but plans fell through on that when a couple people who were going to be our main actors got sick, and so we couldn't carry it on, but we are going to try and resurrect it for next year. We have the Mid-Michigan laser tag guys come on board and play laser tag. So like I said, You name it, we do it. One year we had a group of LARPers come on, live action role players. And they took over the ship for 2 weekends in November. And they turned it into a starship. They blocked out all the windows on the bridge and had all the computers up there and that kind of stuff. And it became the Star Trek thing, and they did a whole scenario of stuff. They even made a alien out of gelatin and dissected it in the sick bay. So I mean, it was crazy. It was very interesting because I was able to go in and talk with all these people, because once it started, if you hadn't paid your fee, you were asked to leave. And it was cold that weekend, and none of them left. They stayed on the ship. I think the temperature dropped down on that Saturday, the first Saturday night they were there, to 16 degrees. And they ate it up. And they were all set to come back, and the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit, that's when. So, but we're looking forward to the tall ships coming back in 2025, because if you want to avoid all the crowds downtown, they come right by us, and you can sit up on the deck of the ship and watch the tall ships come by. That's how I ended up with the ship, because that was my wife's one demand before I could get on the ship, that she wanted a seat to watch the tall ships come in. And so I told Mike Kegley that, and he said, fine, don't worry about it. So the day came, we came up there, and he says, come on with me. And right there on the O1 level by the cannon cocker's room, there was a chair there with an umbrella duct taped to it, so they didn't want her to get hot, and a cooler filled with water, and her name was on the chair. And she says, you can come up here whenever you want. So it happens. Any other questions? If not, then I thank you very much for your time. Hope to see you up the ship.